Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. This video is going to feel a little bit different because today I'm talking about Vikings. The question you might never have asked is why were they such a big deal? On paper, Vikings aren't special. They didn't have a huge armada, they didn't have a massive army, they didn't have advanced weaponry, but they spent over 400 years doing pretty much whatever they wanted to anyone who had the audacity to live near the European coast. They were so feared at the time that the churches in Europe had a special prayer that was, "Lord, deliver us from the fury of the Northmen." Historians pondered this question for a long time. Was it their familiarity with the seas? Maybe, but there were lots of other nations with a greater naval power. Was it their characteristic lightning raids, where they would attack and plunder without warning and escape before anyone could even mount a counterattack? I mean, sure, that was terrifying to anyone who experienced it or even heard about it, but barbarian hordes had done that for thousands of years, just using horses instead of boats. Well, maybe it's those boats then. They were especially fast and light, and they could attack and then they could escape back to the safety of the seas. But if you just think about it, that can't be all there is to it, because it would have been simple for anybody else to copy those kind of boats and take away that advantage. This concept of Vikings as unstoppable juggernauts has endured for over 1,000 years. Why were they so powerful and intimidating? I contend that the answer actually is in those boats, but it's not the boat itself. It's the fact that it only had enough room in it for the raiding party. Unlike the Roman army that used galley slaves to row their great boats, the Vikings took that on themselves. These guys were rowing their own boats to and from the battles. And oh, by the way, in some of the most treacherous waters on the planet of the North Atlantic. Whether they had any clue of the benefits from side effects of that rowing will forever be a mystery, but it definitely helped them in at least a few ways, and that's what I really want to unpack. The first and most obvious one is just good old physical exercise. When you spend day after day, like a big chunk of your adult life, navigating these multi-ton ships through notoriously rough water, it's going to build up some serious physical fitness. So when these guys got off the boat and charged into battle, there's some seriously well-developed muscles that are now swinging an axe or sword and you've got to contend with. That alone will make them a force to be reckoned with. So what's any of that have to do with you and me? I mean, I'm not a Viking, and I'm really not trying to inspire anyone to go off raiding and pillaging. But what I do want to encourage you to do is to row your own boat. In simplest terms, that means owning your faith, taking personal responsibility for your relationship with Jesus. The easiest example is a story just like mine. Growing up in a Christian home with Christian parents and Christian friends, and it can be real easy to assume that you're in good shape spiritually. And while having that kind of support around you is a good thing, for sure, it can also become a weakness sooner or later. The uncomfortable truth is when there's so many other people rowing, it's easy for you to kind of relax and not be pushing and not developing your own strength like you could and should be. Your parents' faith, your pastor's faith, maybe friends, grandparents, youth pastor, whatever. The point is, the boat's moving along pretty well whether you're really working at it or not. I don't think anyone ever does it on purpose, but you just sort of exist in the middle of all of this momentum. But sooner or later, you get off the boat and into battle. That might be leaving home, going to college, or moving out on your own for the first time, or even just working in a different environment. But the point is, how strong are your muscles now for this? Are you prepared for the resistance that's going to come? Because, make no mistake, it's coming. Advertisements and entertainment paint this image of what life should look like. New friends from an entirely different background think that their perspective on life and the world and human relationships is just as obvious and logical and reasonable as you think yours is. The pressure and stress of schedules and grades and bosses and bills. Let's go ahead and throw in some relationships, maybe even kids. All of these require strength of character and depth of faith to handle them in a godly way. And if you've always had people around you guiding your decisions, telling you the answers, or worse yet, shielding you from all the hard things, then your muscles are not developed and you are dangerously weak for the fight. That's just one example, because rowing your boat applies to a lot more than just children. You could be retired and letting someone else row your boat. Let's even say you go ahead and attend church regularly. That could be in person, online, on TV, however you do that. Let's assume you're getting some form of teaching most weeks. And we'll give it the benefit of the doubt and assume that that includes some decent biblical doctrine. But then what? If you don't take it to heart and live it out and learn how to teach yourself beyond that, you're not rowing your boat. But when you read the Bible on your own and pray on your own and find somewhere to serve, maybe in a local church, better yet, somewhere out in the world, you will be strengthened. And then when you come up against the inevitable things that you don't understand and don't know how to handle, you have a foundation of time with God, a level of familiarity with His Word, and a history of depending on Him and seeing His faithfulness in your own life. And those are things that you can lean on instead of crumbling under the pressure. And rowing is just like any other exercise. The more you do it, the easier it gets. Regular Bible reading takes a lot of effort and discipline at first, but eventually it comes to a point where it refreshes and energizes you instead of taking mental energy. Praying, giving, fasting, serving, all of these things have a crossover point where they switch from being something that you're doing out of a duty or responsibility or just sheer willpower into becoming something that you are so anxious to do it and you can't wait for that time of day or that day of the week when you get to do this again. But you only get to that point through practice. So don't just depend on someone else. Don't wait for your pastor to give you the answers. Don't wait for your grandma to pray for you. Don't just assume someone else will meet that need that you see in your community. These are the things that make us stronger. This is how we grow in Christ. There's no denying that rowing can be tedious work, and there are no shortcuts, but the end result is absolutely worth it.